Thanks for tuning into this video on Maple Leafs Man Advantage. I am Hawkeye, and this is a special one for me. These are usually a little longer. This is going to be a little longer for sure. I'm going to talk about the 1973 NHL Amateur Draft and see who was selected, more or less with the Toronto Maple Leafs. My own very team, if I was the general manager of the Leafs, as last season was very different. Um, and then take a look at who was picked throughout the draft around perhaps who the Leafs didn't pick and maybe they should have. Now, I'll just start off first. If you like this video, go on ahead and hit like or the thumbs up. Um, you can subscribe as well, but I would really appreciate that. There's other videos on here I've got about hockey, more or less the Leafs, not always though. And if you want to comment on anything, go ahead and do so. That would be awesome. I'd love to talk hockey. That'd be great. So, anyways, we're now at May the 15th, 1973. And this is when the NHL Amateur Draft was held. Now, it was held at the Mount Royal Hotel in Montreal, Quebec. And now with the WHA up and running, it's been running for a year. Whomever you draft, there is no guarantee they're going to want to, skate their way over to your organization. The WHA also has its very own draft, and will be drafting some of these very players in their draft, and they'll be putting in offers to these players as well. So and there you have it. There's a fight for these players for sure at this point. Now, looking at the 1972-73 season, it certainly was the New York Islanders that were in last place. They only had 30 points. As I've said in that other videos, they certainly had parts of a team that can really do something, but they really needed some help. And so, therefore, they're going to be getting the first overall pick. Looking at the 72-73 season, as I wrote down, I'm not sure if I said it in another video, but they were a full 90 points, which usually means you're a good team, but that's 90 points below the Montreal Canadiens who were in first. That's huge. So they really do need some help on Long Island. And I'm going to tell you, they hit it out of the ballpark. The Islanders did with their number one draft in the 1973 draft, as they drafted defenseman Dennis Bogdan. I remember him when I was a kid. He was right at the end of his career, but man, he was still so good. He could really play. He ended up playing his whole career for the New York Islanders. I said it in another video. I'm going to say it again. He's on a list of guys, one of the greatest defensemen of all time. Any way you want to play, he could play it, I think. Big man, could hit hard, could shoot hard, great offensively, great defensively as well. Um, I think he could do it all. That was Dennis Bogdan. So he went on to play 1,060 games. He scored 310 goals, which is a ton for a defenseman. He would assist on 742. So he had 1,052 points. That's like this close to getting a point a game. And that's for your entire career. That's amazing. Dennis was tough and didn't back down from anyone either, as he also grabbed 1,356 penalty minutes. In the playoffs, he played 185 games, scored 56 goals, assisting on 108 others. So he had 164 points in the playoffs. And he also got 4 consecutive cups with the New York Islanders. In addition, he also had 253 PIMs, 28 power play goals, and 7 game winners in the playoffs. He went on to win the Calder Trophy this upcoming season, his first season, and he won the Norris as the top defenseman 3 times. Dennis was a no doubt Hall of Famer. He was the meaning of a stud defenseman, and the Islanders got their hands on him, number one pick in the 1973 draft. Excellent on them. So this draft opens up very nicely here with Potvin going first. And looking around, this appears to be a very good draft. There's some good ones here. Now, the Leafs, they have three, count them, three picks in the first round. So that may all add up to be very good for Toronto. In turn, my team has got two. I would have the draft pick they got from Boston and my own draft pick. So those would be the only two I'd have. I would be keeping that draft pick that was traded for Bernie Toronto. I need Bernie in my net. So looking at Toronto, their first pick was high. They were going to be number 4 in this draft. They missed the playoffs the previous season, and to me, that is indeed a high draft pick. Certainly, there's 16 teams in the top 4. You're in the top quarter of the picks. Yep, that's a high pick to me. Top 5. Um, that's high. Certainly in today, top 5 is high as well. I know there's a lot more teams now. There's what, like 32 teams? I don't know. Once you get to 10, is that really high? Like there's 9 players before them. I don't know, but throughout the entire draft, there's guys to be had that can play. But there you have it. Um, so yeah. Now, if to be honest, I was gonna say if not to be honest, it will put your team back as you're already not a not so good team. Just saying, sorry for the wait there. Trying to make sense of what I wrote there. Um, but if you have a high draft pick, like the Leafs do here, and you end up not drafting well, you just draft another guy to put in your lineup. He can play, he's good, but he's not excellent or he's not a game changer. Um, I don't, not to say it'll really set your team back because you got a guy that can play, but you're not really taking those big strides to get better. Um, for example, there are some examples. If you are a good team or an excellent team and you're able to swing a deal and somehow land a pick within, the top 5 and draft excellently with that pick, my lord, it's like the Montreal Canadiens when they got Guy Lafleur in. He was originally supposed to be the number one pick for the California Golden Seals, but it was traded to the Montreal Canadiens. Boy, did they ever do a spectacular deal on that one. But if you choose poorly, you're really not improving. Um, where you're sort of given this choice to draft someone, given the choice to pick who you want to be on your team. Um, Choose correctly, and you're moving your way up the standings for sure. And the New York Islanders proved this out wonderfully with this number one pick in Dennis Potvin. Now, the Leafs ended up choosing right winger Lanny McDonald, number 4 pick. Excellent choice there. He was also known as Mac or Machine Gun, likely due to his deceptively good shot. He was born on February 16, 1953, in Hanna, Alberta. Now, in junior, Lanny was a goal scorer. He did play 3 seasons in the WCHL. He played only 6 games in 1970-71 for the Calgary Centennials. Now, for the following season, 1971-72, he played with the Medicine Hat Tigers. He scored 50 goals and had 114 points in just 68 games. Excellent job there. Now, the next season, he scored 62 goals, even more goals, and had 139 points, along with 84 penalty minutes. He wasn't a big penalty minute guy to me, in just 68 games. He, I'm assuming he was highly thought of. They knew this guy could score. He was doing it in junior. Now, when Lanny made the NHL, he went on to play 1,111 NHL games, and he got an even 500 goals to go with 506 assists for 1,006 points. In 1982-83, he had 66 goals and 98 points for the Calgary Flames. Now in the playoffs, Lanny played 117 games. He scored 44 goals with 40 assists for 84 points, and he had 120 penalty minutes. Lanny won the 1989 Stanley Cup with the Calgary Flames. That was actually his final season. He won the Bill Masterton in 1982-83, won the King Clancy in 1988-89, and played in 4 All-Star games. He led the league in power play goals in 1976-77 when he had 16. He led the league in 1982-83 when he had 5 hat tricks. That's pretty darn good. And hey, he was a Hall of Famer as well. So in the end, he's going to the Hall. So much like Boreas Salming and Dennis, I remember him in his last few years in Calgary, the old man with the big bushy red mustache. My mom was like, yes, he played in Toronto. He was a big goal scorer in Toronto. She loved him. Great player. Um, but definitely, I remember him kind of playing down the lineup of, if you will, more defensive hockey. I remember him doing that. So, but he did spend 7 seasons in Toronto, so he was there for a while. But unfortunately for Lanny and really much more of the Leafs, their parting of the ways was definitely a rough patch for the Leafs and their history. And certainly hope to be getting to that particular trade. That's years down the road from right now. But that'll be a sore spot, uh, not the only one, with the Leafs through the years. So, other than the Leafs in Calgary, he also played for the Colorado Rockies as well. And I would certainly not change this pick. Laney is the right guy to go with here, and an excellent first round draft pick by the Leafs. He's going to be playing in the blue and white. Now, the Leafs also had the number 10 pick. Um, they ended up selecting that. Now, if you remember, this was the draft pick that was traded to them from the Philadelphia Flyers in the Bernie Perron trade. I'm hanging on to Bernie. He's playing in my net, but in that trade, the Leafs ended up getting this pick. They ended up selecting defenseman Bob Neely. He was also known as Waldo. Good nickname. He was born on November the 9th, 1953 in Sarnia, Ontario. In junior, he played in the OHA for the Hamilton Red Wings and the Peterborough Petes. In total, he played 138 games, scored 39 goals with 93 assists for 132 points and 638 penalty minutes, which seems like a lot. Um, it's almost a point a game. He's a defenseman. That's pretty good. In his final season playing with the Petes, he scored 24 goals and 67 points, and he had 304 penalty minutes. Holy cow! In just 55 games. Now, when he made the NHL, he did play 283 games, grabbed 98 points. He ended up playing left wing up on left wing for at least one season. I think he had like 19 goals or in the high teens in goals. So he had some offense to him too, as he showed in junior. But most of the time, I think he played on defense. Um, Now, looking at who was around Bob, like, was this the right selection? He did only play 283 games in the NHL, and I do see somebody, and who they could have chose was right winger Rick Middleton. He ended up playing 1,005 games, scoring 448 goals with 540 assists for 988 points, almost a point a game. He scored 51 goals in 1981-82 for the Boston Bruins. That was in the middle of scoring 40 goals in 5 consecutive seasons. That's impressive. He also had 100 points in 2 separate seasons in 1980, 81, and 1983, 84, both for the Bruins. Incredibly, I mentioned these guys too. I like to talk about guys with penalty minutes, but I also like to talk about guys who don't have very many penalty minutes at all. In the 1,005 games, he only had 157 penalty minutes. That's incredible. I think his career high was 24, I think, but usually it was well below that penalty minutes in a season. So yeah, he won the Lady Byng. He won that in 1980, 81, 82. He was an All-Star three times, so 1981, 82, and 84. He also played in 114 playoff games and showed that same scoring prowess. He was able to bring that in the playoffs as well. He had 45 goals and 55 assists for a clean 100 points. He also played and was drafted by the New York Rangers, but they traded him to the Bruins. I think he'd only been in the league 2 or 3 years, and they traded him to Boston. And he became a star in Boston, and that's where he's known for playing. I remember him in his last couple of years playing. He had no helmet, but I remember him, and I liked him. I liked the Bruins back then. Him and Ray Bork and Cam Neely and Andy Moog. I liked the Bruins. They didn't play Toronto very often. They're in totally different conferences back then. But I certainly do remember him playing when I was a kid. Now, for my own team, for the Toronto Maple Leaf pick, I would be at number 11. So I'm going to miss out on Lanny McDonald, the Hall of Famer. That's really too bad. That would allow the St. Louis Blues, who would be picking after Toronto, to go in there and draft Lanny McDonald if they wanted. They ended up drafting goalie John Davidson, who was a pretty good goalie. I think he got hurt fairly young. He went and played for the New York Rangers as well. So he was kind of out of the NHL at an earlier age. But he was a good goalie. He was a number one goalie. But if they didn't choose Davidson, they could choose Lanny McDonald. After St. Louis was the Boston Bruins. And they could pick up Lanny McDonald. And they have already got a very strong team in Boston. So that wouldn't be good if they picked up Lanny. Just saying. So with this selection, I would pick Rick Middleton. He would be coming to my team as my first round draft pick. Now, the Leafs also had in the first round another draft pick. They had the number 15 pick that I would choose as well. This was from the Boston Bruins when Toronto traded away Jacques Plante to the Bruins. They ended up selecting defenseman Ian Turnbull. Great pick here. He was also known as Bull or Bobby Hawk. He was born on December the 22nd, 1952, in Montreal, Quebec. Ian had played 4 seasons in the OHA for the Montreal Junior Canadiens and then the Ottawa 67s. He really showed some offensive promise as he played 226 games in junior, scored 80 goals with 153 assists for 233 points, as well as 348 penalty minutes. He had more than a point a game as a D-man. That is impressive. In his third season, he scored 34 goals with 82 points and 85 penalty minutes in 63 games. He actually won the Memorial Cup in his very first season with the Junior Canadiens. Also on this team, just to tell you, it wasn't all Ian. Also on this team was Gilbert Perreault and Rick Martin. Turnbull was only 15 at the time, one of the younger guys on the team for sure. Now, in the NHL, Turnbull went on to play 628 games, scoring 123 goals with 317 assists for 440 points, along with 736 penalty minutes. He was one of only two defensemen to ever play with the Toronto Maple Leafs where they had multiple 20-goal seasons. They both had two. Ian Turnbull was one. The other was Ali Afraidy. They had only one other defenseman that scored 20 goals for Toronto. And at this point, he's only got the one, but that was Morgan Riley. They've only had three defensemen that have ever done it. Incredible. So few defensemen have done that in Toronto. Meaning, Boria Salming never scored 20 goals in a season for the blue and white. Now, his career high was 22 in 1976-77. He was also an All-Star in that very season. And there was a game. I saw it. I wasn't alive at the time. So I saw a replay of it, of the game, his game. He scored 5 goals in one game. He only had 5 shots, and then he hit the post. He almost scored 6 goals as a defenseman in one game. He still scored 5, which, if I'm not mistaken, is a record, and there's not many guys that have done that. I think there's like 2 or 3 in the history of the NHL that have done that in one game. And he did that for Toronto. It was against the Detroit Red Wings. They killed them that night. It was like 11-2 or something. It wasn't even close. But he did that in one game. And he also played for the LA Kings and the Pittsburgh Penguins, sorry. And this selection I would not change as well. Ian is the right guy to pick here at number 15. So that leads us into the second round. And by the way, there's 13 rounds in this draft. Meanwhile, the last 2 drafts, it's just like Montreal picks one player per round. But the Leafs are going to be involved in 11 rounds this season. Anyways, now the Leafs did trade away their second round draft pick to Philly in that where they gave Philly Bernie Perrant. It was almost like that pick shouldn't have been put in there. Bernie's worth more than a first rounder, but yeah, they traded away this pick as well. But I wouldn't have done this, so I would still have my second round draft pick, and I would have them pick number 27. With this selection, I would choose left winger Pat Hickey. He later would play in Toronto. He was originally drafted at pick number 30 by the New York Rangers. Now, before Pat played in the NHL, he actually went to the WHA and played for the Toronto Toros and played for them for 2 seasons. And he showed some good offense. He had 61 goals. Um, he had 35 in 1974-75 and 63 assists for 124 points in 152 games. Pretty good for a youngster just coming in the league like that. He then came over to the NHL and was playing for the Rangers, who drafted him. Um, so we'll just say, yeah, same thing's going to happen. He's going to go play for the Toros, who I swear were playing in Maple Leaf Gardens anyways. And after a couple of years, he can come and play for the blue and white. He ended up playing 644 NHL games. He had 192 goals, 212 assists for 404 points. He actually had 40 goals in 1977-78 for the Rangers. So besides playing for the Rangers, who he played for on 2 occasions, and the Maple Leafs, he also played for the Colorado Rockies, Quebec Nordique, and the St. Louis Blues over his NHL career. Actually, his brother Greg Hickey ended up playing one game for the New York Rangers during the 1977-78 season. That's a lot of sevens in there. Anyway, so I would be choosing Pat Hickey in the second round. Now, in the third round, I would actually have the New York Islanders draft pick in the trade in which I sent them Vic Vanaski. With this pick, I would just select who the Islanders selected and choose Dave Lewis, defenseman. He went on to play 1,008 games. Now, offense wasn't a big part of his game. He got some points. He had 36 goals and 187 assists for 223 points. But that wasn't the big part. It was his defense that was part of Dave's game. But after he played, he got into coaching. He was an assistant and then an associate coach for the Detroit Red Wings for 13 seasons from 1988 through 2002. He won 3 cups with them, so 1970, 1997, 98, and 2002. And then he took over the head coaching gig there for 2 seasons after, I believe it was Scotty Bowman that left. He then was a head coach for the Boston Bruins in 2006, 2007, and then was an assistant coach with the Carolina Hurricanes for 3 seasons, 2011 through 2014. So I would select Dave Lewis as my first third round pick. Now, the Leafs' third round pick was traded to Boston in that deal that got them Ian Turnbull. They traded away that draft pick So there's no other third round pick to be selected here. Now, in the fourth round, I would also have the California Golden Seals fourth round selection that saw me ship over Stan Weir and Ron Lowe to the Golden Seals previous year. So this would be pick number 50. Um, and with this selection, I would select Dean Talafus. He was selected with pick number 53 by the Atlanta Flames. He went on to play 497 games, scoring 104 goals with 154 assists for 258 points. He scored 22 goals in 1976-77 for the Minnesota North Stars. And other than the Flames and the North Stars, he also played for the New York Rangers. So that is who I would select with my first selection in the fourth round. Now, the Leafs would have pick number 52. Just before the Leafs picked Talafus, the Leafs end up selecting left wing Frank Rachon. Born on April the 18th, 1953 in Laval, Quebec, he played 4 seasons in the queue for the Laval Saints, Rosemont Nationals, and Sherbrooke Castors. There he played 240 games, scoring 102 goals with 125 assists for 227 points and 250 penalty minutes. In his final season for the Castors, he scored 52 goals and had 109 points. Very good. Frank, though, did not play in the NHL, but he'd go and play in the WHA. He was drafted in the third round of their draft by the Chicago Cougars. Other than the Cougars, he also played for the Denver Spurs, Ottawa Civics, which was the same team, 2 cities in the same year, as well as the Indianapolis Racers. Altogether, he played 255 WHA games, scoring 71 goals with 60 assists for 131 points. In 1974-75 for the Cougars, he scored 27 goals. Good job there. Yeah, the Leafs, they should have chose Talafus, sorry, with this pick. They should have went with him. Now, myself also in the fourth round, my own Leaf pick, I would be at number 59. And I would be just selecting who went to the Detroit Red Wings, and that was defenseman Mike Corning. He ended up playing 77 NHL games with 9 goals, 10 assists for 19 points. So I will select him in the fourth round. So we're going into the fifth round now, and the Leafs would have pick number 68. With this pick, the Leafs chose left winger Gord Titcomb, born on September the 3rd, 1953, in Moncton, New Brunswick. He had played a couple of seasons in the OHA for the St. Catharines Blackhawks. He played 97 goals, scoring 23 goals with 41 assists for 64 points, and may have been a bit of a rough guy on the ice as he had 326 penalty minutes as well. Sadly for the Leafs, Gordon never did play an NHL game, but he did play 2 games in the WHA for the Toronto Toros in 1974-75, and he got an assist. Um, so who the Leafs should have picked in the fifth round? I should have chose a different left winger, sorry, and that was John Flesch. He ended up playing 124 NHL games. He scored 18 goals with 23 assists for 41 points, and he was originally selected by the Atlanta Flames with the very next pick. He didn't have a huge, long career, but he did play over 100 games in the NHL, so he would be a better selection with this pick. Now, from my team, if I were running the Leafs, my pick would have been traded over to the New York Islanders. In the very trade that saw me get the third round pick of this very draft when I selected Dave Lewis, but that pick would be going over to the New York Islanders. So we're going to fly into the sixth round now. And the Leafs had the number 84 pick. And they chose a defenseman, and they went with Doug Merritt. Born on June the 7th, 1953, in Willowbunch, Saskatchewan, he had played 3 seasons in the WCHL for the Regina Pats. Altogether, he played 128 games, scoring 12 goals with 45 assists for 57 points. Huh. Sadly, another player, Doug, never did play in the NHL, but he did play 3 seasons in the IHL for the Saginaw Gears, and he showed a bit of offense playing with that team in that league. Now, with this selection in the 6th round, the very next pick to the Atlanta Flames, the Leafs should have went with a defenseman. Um, they could have chosen Ken Houston. Uh, when he came to the NHL, he then converted up to right wing and looked to be quite a successful idea in playing him up in the lineup, and did show some good offense going on there. He went on to play 570 NHL games, scoring 161 goals with 167 assists for 328 points. He also had 624 penalty minutes. He was a 6-time 20-goal scorer and had a career high 25 for the Washington Capitals in 1982-83. Yes, yeah, as I said, he was originally selected by the Atlanta Flames with the very next pick. Um, he stayed with them until he became the Calgary Flames, played with them for a couple of seasons, but he also played for the LA Kings as well, and that is Ken Houston in the 6th round. So, a little bit later in this round would be my selection with the Leafs. And I would select defenseman Glenn Sikello, I believe is how you pronounce it. He never did play a game in the NHL, and no one selected around Glenn really made an impact in the NHL either. But Glenn, though, did end up going to the university route, getting a higher education, and played for Concordia University in 1974-75. So we're going into the 7th round now, and the Leafs have the 100th pick overall. And they're going to go with a goaltender now. And they went with Dan Follett, I think is how you pronounce that. He never did make the NHL, which is unfortunate. And the Leafs could have made a pick here to strengthen their team out on the ice with some muscle. They could have selected John Wensink. He went at pick 104 to the Pittsburgh Penguins. In junior, he played his entire junior career with the Cornwall Royals. Um, John didn't really show a lot of offensive promise in junior. His career high in those 3 seasons was 11. That was the best he did in a season. But he did have 248 penalty minutes in his final year there. So he was uh, accustomed to going to the penalty box. He also won the Memorial Cup in 1972 with the Royals. So on that team as well was Blair McDonald, who also went in this draft, as well as Richard Brodeur was in net, and Bob Murray was on defense as well. And I have a feeling I've already talked about this team, and I think it was when I was talking maybe about Bob Murray or maybe Richard Brodeur, one or the other. But yeah, that team went on to win the Memorial Cup. So in his NHL career, John went on to play 403 NHL games, scoring 70 goals with 68 assists for 138 points. He also had 840 penalty minutes. He did, in fact, score 28 goals for the Boston Bruins in 1978-79. He did that. Other than Boston, he played for the St. Louis Blues, Quebec Nordiques, Colorado Rockies, and the New Jersey Devils, but I'm pretty sure he's most known for playing with the Bruins. And they were a very strong team that he played with in Boston. So for my selection in the 7th round, I would end up selecting another Middleton. This time it would be defenseman Brian Middleton. He never did make the NHL. No one around him made any kind of big impact in the NHL as well. So I'll just go with who was selected at that pick, and Brian Middleton. And Brian, he as well went the university route and played for the University of Alberta from 1972 through 75. And I'm assuming he got himself a higher education and went into other jobs using the knowledge that he gained in that university. So in the 8th round, the Leafs have the 116th pick overall. With this pick, the Leafs chose left winger Les Burgess. Born on September 19, 1953 in South Porcupine, Ontario, Les had played 3 seasons in the the OHA, not the WHA, the OHA for the Kitchener Rangers. He played 165 games, scoring 40 goals with 83 assists for 123 points and had 172 points. Each season, his offensive numbers kept getting bigger, so that's a good sign. But unfortunately, Les never did suit up for a game in the NHL. Now, there's another player that the Leafs could have selected in this round, and it's another Pim King they could have got, and that is, that would be forward Dennis Polanovich. He was selected at pick 118 by the Detroit Red Wings. Um, and he played his entire career with the Red Wings. He went on to play 390 games, scoring 59 goals with 82 assists for 141 points. He also had 1,242 penalty minutes. That's a lot for a guy that hasn't even played 400 NHL games. It's crazy because Dennis stood at only 5'6", and when I'm looking up, he was 166 pounds. Not a big guy, but he must have been the toughest dude in his height and his weight. Uh, take on everybody. He must have. And in his rookie season, he had a 302 penalty minutes. Now, to let you know of a play, I'd never seen it. I was reading about it. There was a play that happened in the 1978-79 season when Dennis was hit with a baseball type swing from the stick of Wilf Umont, who would later play in Toronto, but at the time was playing for the Colorado Rockies. Now, this is also at a time when hockey was at its most violent, I would say. I mean, this was the 1970s, um, and that would continue through into the 80s. It was still quite violent. It was still, yeah, violence is in the game for a while here, guys. Sorry, but Dennis, he ended up missing 20 games after this incident. I think he had a concussion, broken nose. I think a big cut on his face from the brutal contact that was made by Wilf Paymont. Um, and they say it's one of the most violent acts ever seen in hockey was this one here. Wilf. Now, in today's standards, it would be much different. But back at that time, Wilf was suspended for 15 games, which is gigantic because that was at a time where suspensions didn't happen very often, and a lot of guys weren't suspended for their acts of violence out on the ice. In today's world, if this happened, Paymont would receive a gigantic suspension, perhaps missing who knows how long, um, and perhaps the court of law would step in and perhaps look at this case. It was, I believe it was, they tried to take it to a court of law, but it was shot down or wasn't accepted to go through the court of law. There was a lot of that back in that time. Some cases, I think there was one involving Dan Maloney that went to court, but there was never any like prosecutions or anything like that. And much different. Today, it would be much different. The game is not played with that same emotion or violence like it was back in the day. But that's something that happened to Dennis Polanovich. I have a difficult time saying his name, Polanovich. Yeah, sorry. Um, so that's who the Leafs could have drafted in the eighth round. Now, for my own pick in the eighth round, I would have picked 123. And with this pick, I would select who was chosen at this pick by the Detroit Red Wings. I'm assuming he's still available, hopefully, and that is George Lyle. He went over and played in the WHA for 3 seasons for the New England Whalers. from 1976-79. But then he came and played for the Detroit Red Wings after the WHA uh, folded. He in the WHA he played 202 games, scoring 86 goals with 75 assists for 161 points. He scored 30 goals twice in the league and had 39 in his rookie season, winning the Lou Kaplan Trophy as the Rookie of the Year. The winner of the final Lou Kaplan Trophy was Wayne Gretzky, just to let you know. After the WHA folded, he went on to play 99 NHL games, scoring 24 goals with 38 assists. Having a tough time speaking, for 62 points. And that's who I would select in the eighth round. So in the ninth round, the Leafs had the number 132 pick. With the selection, the Leafs ended up picking forward Dave Hay. Born on July 13th, 1953 in St. Catharines, Ontario, he played one season in the OHA for the St. Catharines Blackhawks. He played 54 games, scoring 4 goals with 6 assists for 10 points. Dave was in the track in the middle of actually furthering his education. He was playing for the University of Wisconsin, and he played from them from 1972 through 74, so a couple of seasons. And in the end, Dave never did play in the NHL after he was drafted, unfortunately. Yeah, the Leafs should have picked up another tough guy is available here this late in the draft, and he's a defenseman. They could have drafted Gord Lane. He originally went at pick 134 to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Gordon went on to play 540 NHL games, scoring 19 goals with 94 assists for 113 points. He also had 1,128 penalty minutes. In 1976-77, as a rookie for the Washington Capitals, he had 207 penalty minutes. He also played for the New York Islanders. With the Islanders, he was a big part in them winning those 4 Stanley Cups in a row from 1980 through 1983. He was on defense, giving them a big hand back there. So that's who the Leafs should have drafted in the ninth round. So with my selection in the ninth round, I would have pick number 138. And with this pick, I'm going to go with a goalie here. I'm going to select Jim Petty. He ended up playing 21 NHL games. He had 7 wins, 2 ties, and an 855 save percentage, which I got to say, that's not good enough for the NHL. As I also see, he only played 21 games, um, but yet his goals against average was 3.68, and he had a shutout in there as well. But I also see he was playing with the Boston Bruins in the 70s, and they were a strong or one of the stronger teams in the league. But if you put him, say, in California or the Cleveland Barons or something, boy, his goals against average would be much higher. But I'm going to draft him. I'm going to pick him. Maybe I can put him in as a backup goalie for a season or something. We'll see what happens. But I would draft Jim Petty in the ninth round of this draft. So here we go. We're now going into the 10th round. I've gone through pages here. I've still got a couple more, but we're in the 10th round here, the 1973 draft. And what happened? The Leafs had worked out a deal with the New York Islanders that saw them grab both the 10th and the 11th round picks from the Islanders for cash. So first in the 10th round, they selected defenseman Lee Palmer. He had played 3 games in 1970-71 for the Peterborough Petes. He had grabbed 4 penalty minutes. That was his junior career. But he was in the middle of 20 University. He was playing for the Clarkson University, where he played from 1972 through 74. And in the end, Lee never did make the NHL, and no one around him made a dent in the NHL either. So just pick this. Keep this pick for the Leafs in the 10th round. So the Leafs would also have pick number 147. With this pick, they ended up selecting center Bob Keese. He was born in Hespeler, Ontario. Bob would go on to play at Cornell University, where he would play from 1973 through 75. He played 39 games there, scoring 9 goals with 10 assists for 19 points. He never did play a game in the NHL, but he did carve out a nice 10-year career playing senior hockey in Aurelia, Cambridge, and Flamborough from the mid 70s through the mid 80s. Um, so that's good. He was able to keep his career or his hockey alive, if you will, even though he was not in the NHL at that point. But there was no one around Bob that made a mark either. So you can keep this pick in the 10th round for the Leafs. So with my own team in the 10th round, I would have pick number 154. I would end up selecting defenseman Ken Gibb. He never did play a game in the NHL, but he did play for the University of North Dakota in 1972-73 and 1974-75, which is kind of odd. Those are 2 years, but not consecutive. So I don't know if the wrong season was put down or if that actually happened, but he did play for them for 2 seasons. And Ken never did make the NHL either, and nobody around him um, made a dent in the NHL either. So the Leafs also had the Islanders' 11th round pick as well, with pick 159. With this selection, the Leafs ended up choosing left winger Norm Macdonald. Born on March the 21st, 1953 in Toronto. Norm had played 1 season for the Ottawa 67s in the OHA. He played 53 games, scoring 2 goals and 9 assists for 11 points. And once again, another player that didn't make the NHL. And yeah, so there you have it. But there is a guy, another guy, the Leafs could have selected this late in the draft. He's a very good 11th round pick. And that would be defenseman Greg Fox. He was selected by the Atlanta Flames at the next pick, at pick 162. That's not the next pick, but it's a few after. Atlanta appears like they're drafting well. They're making some good selections through this draft. But he went on to play 494 NHL games, scoring 14 goals with 93 assists for 107 points, while he accumulated 637 penalty minutes. Other than the Flames, he also played for the Chicago Blackhawks and the Pittsburgh Penguins. So in the end, um, for my team, I would not throw the Islanders any cash. You guys can keep those draft picks, or maybe some other team wants a stab at those draft picks. You guys can keep them. Um, and what the Leafs ended up doing in the 11th round was trading their pick to the Minnesota North Stars for cash. What I'll do is I'll keep this pick. So I'm not trading any draft picks at this point. I'll keep that pick. And with this pick, I will select Greg Fox. Um, so there you have it. So that's who I would pick in the 11th round is Greg Fox. So in the end, it was good for the Leafs this draft. They went through 11 rounds. They ended up getting Lanny McDonald and Ian Turnbull right in the first round. Um, Great selections there. But as I found, they missed out on infusing some more goal scoring, such as Rick Middleton or Ken Houston, drafting those guys, or adding some big muscle in their lineup, like John Wensink, Dennis Polnovich, or Gord Lane, putting those guys in the lineup. For my team, I did miss out on Hall of Famer McDonald, which is huge. Really too bad, but I did add Middleton, Turnbull, and Dave Lewis right there. I got him in the third round as well. So that's the 1973 NHL Amateur Draft. That was a bigger one. Tried to fly through that as quick as I could, but that's it. And I'm going to put a list here now of who is coming up on my team, and I can't wait to show you. who I got on my team and try and figure out, man, how are we going to do this year? Because I got Bernie in it, man. He is still on my team. He's my number one guy. So that's it. And enjoy your day.